Now that we've gone through a significant amount of information concerning the supply curve and the demand curve, what makes up the supply curve and the demand curve, what shifts supply and demand, the elasticity of supply and demand, we're going to actually put these two things together, which is ultimately what we tend to want to look at, is supply and demand together and how they interact and influence each other or do not influence each other. So we're going to start with what we know. And what we know is that we have prices and quantities, and each one of those has a corresponding quantity supplied and quantity demanded. So if we look at this on kind of a little supply schedule or demand schedule like this, we might have a price of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we've seen that the quantity demanded, we know the quantity demanded is going to fall as the price increases. So let's say this is 10, 8, 6, 4, and 2, just as examples. And we could graph that demand curve, and it's going to look something roughly like that. We're going to have this downward sloping demand curve. But then we can also say, well, we'll put quantity supplied right next to it. And we know that when price goes up, the quantity supplied is going to go up. And so we might get something like this, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. And none of that is new to us. We've seen that sort of thing, and we know that we're going to have this upward sloping supply curve that's going to look something like that. So this is very kind of basic information based upon what we know about the laws of supply and the law of demand. That you have this direct relationship between price and quantity and inverse relationship between price and quantity for supply and demand. So obviously at some point those two things are they're going to intersect. They're going to be equal to each other. And so we can see that at this price of $3, at the price of $3, that we have a quantity demanded of 6 and a quantity supplied of 6. And so we can find that on our graph by looking at this point of intersection. So we see that we have this point of intersection right there. We'll call that $3 and a quantity of 6. So at a price of $3, we have quantity demanded as 6 and quantity supplied is 6. Okay, so this is going to be our point of equilibrium. So what does that mean? That means we have the same amount of buyers as we have goods available. So we have 6 people out there wanting to buy 6 goods, and we have 6 goods available. So no more, no less, not too many buyers, not too many sellers, perfect amount of each one of those. Those are equal to each other. We're in this point of equilibrium. What happens if we price this thing too low? So this is a price that's too low. This is a price that is too high. How do I know it's too high or too low? Well, I can look at what it results in. And so if I look at this price of too low, either $1 or $2, I see that the quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied. And if quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied, that means I have more people out there that want to buy than goods that are available. Right? So this must result in a shortage. Right? It's a shortage because I have 10 buyers and only 2 goods available. Why? Well, because the price is too low. And if the price were to increase up to 3, the quantity demand would go down because the price went up, and the quantity supplied would go up because the price went up, and we would end up at this point of equilibrium. So the shortage is a point of disequilibrium. The price is wrong. The price was too low. And so we can see that too low of price on our graph by seeing it someplace, let's say right here. Right? And so at that price, let's call that $2, we see that the quantity supplied, this is a bad color, let's use a different color. All right, we'll use red as well. So we see here, right, a price of $2, the quantity supplied, it intersects right there, right? And so at $2, the quantity supplied was only 4. If I dot over and I hit that and I dot down, we see that the quantity demanded was 8. So we are short 4. We have a shortage of 4, right? So there are 4 that are sold, right? But there are 8 people that want to buy. So 4 of those 8 people get to buy, but 4 of those 8 people do not get to buy because there's only 4 goods available. So we have a shortage of 4. But again, what if the price were to be too high? Well, let's say the price is up here at $5. Well, now we have the inverse. We have an opposite problem. We have too many goods available, not enough people wanting to buy because it's priced way too high. So up here at this price of 5, let's say, if we dot over and hit that curve and dot down, we see that the quantity demanded is only 2, right? But the quantity supplied way up here is out here at 10, right? And so that means that there's a problem. The problem is we have too many goods available and not enough buyers. And so we have a surplus. In this example, we have a surplus of 8, right? So we have 10 goods available, only 2 people wanting to buy because the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded. So we know that if this market is free and things are able to adjust, if there's a surplus, what eventually is going to happen is that you have all of these sellers trying to undercut each other. I'm going to sell it lower. I'm going to sell it lower. So as they continue to compete, they're going to keep pushing the price further and further down because you have a lot of these things left over. And so they're going to reduce the price to try and be the one that sells. And as they reduce the price, you have fewer and fewer that are able to sell. And so you're going to reduce that quantity supplied. And as they push the price down, you're going to increase the quantity demanded. So you're going to end up kind of moving toward this point of equilibrium. So whether we are up here, I guess you could say down there with a low price, with a shortage, right? With a shortage, you're going to have buyers trying to push the price up. With a surplus, you're going to have sellers trying to push the price down. And you're going to end up tending or kind of naturally moving toward this point of equilibrium. So whether there's a shortage or a surplus, the market is going to end up pushing it toward this price through competition toward a point of equilibrium. Okay, so the question is it buyers or sellers that determine the price? The answer is yes, buyers and sellers through competition determine this equilibrium price of $3. Because if the price was too high, the price would end up getting pushed down because of competition. If the price were too low, the price ends up getting pushed up because of competition. So yes, it is buyers and sellers that contribute to this point of equilibrium. So that's not what I want to do. One of the things that we're going to look at next is how is the market at equilibrium, how is it efficient? So in order to do that, we're going to take a look at a supply and demand curve again and talk about its efficiencies. So let's look at just regular supply and demand, price, quantity. We have supply and demand. And we're going to naturally kind of show our point of equilibrium right here. So if this market were to be free and things worked out the way that they should, we're going to be at, let's call it P3 and Q3. Okay? But first, let's say we are at the wrong spot. Again, let's call this one P1, and we can dot over and dot down and dot over and dot down, and we say, oh yeah, that's a, price is too low, the quantity demand is greater than quantity supply, so that's a shortage. And again, if we were at, let's call it P5, we dot over, dot down, dot over, dot down, and we see a P at 5 we're at a surplus, right? So those should make sense to us. So just as a review of what we were talking about. But now we're going to go back and look at, okay, well, let's say we're at this point of equilibrium. I'm going to erase these quick. We're at this point of equilibrium. Why is it efficient? Why is that like good? Why is that the right spot for the market to be in? So we're going to assess this in terms of why is that beneficial, or how do we see that in terms of consumers and producers? Okay. So now we have the actual price. We have the price of the good. We're going to call it P3. We're going to assess this in terms of consumers first. So let's look at this in red. So what we see is we have this demand curve made up of the buyers up here and then the buyers down here. So in the green portion, these are the buyers that actually get to buy, right? So they buy. they don't buy, right? So why do they not buy? Because the price is too high for them. They're not in the market. They're not willing and able to purchase. And then we have sellers, right? And so we have these producers, and they're over here, they're able to sell. And this group up here, right, not selling. Okay, so why not, right? Again, they don't buy because they're only willing to spend this low amount, and the price is already higher than that, so they can't buy. Why are they not willing to sell? Because they have to sell at this high price, and the price isn't up there. The price is down there, so they're not willing to sell unless the price were to be a lot higher. So we're going to ignore those red people for a second because they're not even in the market. So everything this way, those are exchanges not taking place. So everything on this side, these are the exchanges actually taking place. All those exchanges are taking place between buyers and sellers. So let's assess one of these for a moment. So let's look at this person right up here. This person is willing to buy at this, we'll use actual numbers. Let's say it's 10. And instead of P3, let's call that just 3. Okay. So let's say this is 3. And you have this person up here willing to buy for 10. Now they were willing to spend $10 whole on this good, but did they actually spend the 10? They did not. They spent 3, right? So they were willing to spend 10, but they actually spent 3. Right? So think of this good. Think of this good as they value it like that, right? So let's say this is lemonade, and they value this. The value that they see in this is $10, right? The value they see in that cup is $10 because they would have spent $10 on it. Now, how much did they actually spend? They actually spent $3, right? So think about it like this. This is kind of their cost, right? And this is what they get for that cost. So the point I'm slowly getting to is we want to know how much extra benefit do they get. As a result of this, I'm willing to spend 10. I actually spent 3. All right, so they're walking around. Think of it like this. They're walking around with $10 in their pocket. They give away $3, right? They give away $3, so now they have $7 in their pocket. And they have this cup of lemonade that they spent the $3 on. But they actually value this thing at 10. So now they're walking around in their head with a value of 10 here and the $7 that they still have, I should say, right? For a total value in their head of 17. Now think of it like this. What if they would have they had $10 and they spent all $10. Let's say the cup was $10. Now they're walking around with a cup of lemonade that they value at 10 and $0 more because they spent all of it. Right? So how much value do they have? Right? They have the value of $10 and that's it. But in this scenario, when they only spent the 3, they have the value of $10 plus 7 that they still have. They still have that money. So they're up. They're up an extra 7. Okay? So the difference between what they were willing to spend, the $10 up here, and what they actually spent, which is the price down here, is what we call consumer surplus. So their consumer surplus is the difference between those two, 7. They're walking around with something they value at 10, but they only had to pay 3 for it. They have an extra $7 of value. Let's go on to the next person. Let's say this person right here, they're willing to spend 9. How much did they actually spend? They actually spent 3. So the difference between those two things is a $6 surplus. The next person, 8, $5 surplus. The next person, 7, $4. And $3 and $2 and $1. right? So what we end up looking at is all of these people that actually buy, all the way down to the last person. They are gaining this extra value because they're willing to spend a greater amount than what the price is, all the way down to the very last person spends what they actually value it at, right? The last person, let's say, valued it at $3 and spent $3. So you have all of these individual consumers that have consumer surplus. And what we can do is we can total all of these things up. We can add them all together to get what we call total consumer surplus. So if we look at total consumer surplus, we're actually, by adding all of these up, we're finding the area of this triangle right here that's being highlighted. Okay, and in order to find the area of a triangle, we take 1/2 base times height to find that area. Now, why do we define the area? Because again, we're finding this person plus this person plus this person plus that person plus that, and that, all those different people, all of these quantities that are taking place down here. So well, here, actually, let's call this, let's use an actual number on this one. So let's say this is, I don't know, let's say 7 exchanges take place. Okay, let's say 7 exchanges take place. So we take 1/2, our base is 7, so 7 exchanges took place. And then our height is the difference between our price and what people were willing and able, right? Which is 3 to 10, which is 7. Okay, so what this equals is 49 divided by 2, which would be 24.5. Okay, so what we call this is total consumer surplus. All right, last concept is simple. It's just looking at the flip side, producer surplus. We have this same sort of formula and same sort of concept. Now, the idea here is that you have this willingness and ability to sell. So this person here would have sold this good at, let's say, 50 cents, but they got to sell it for 3. They had the opportunities to sell it for above what they would have sold it for. So that person, $2.50 extra producer surplus. And the next person, they would have sold it for $1, got to sell it for $3, $2 consumer or producer surplus for them. And then let's say this is $1.50, and this is $1, and this is 50 cents, and then 25 cents, all the way down to the very last seller. So in order to figure out this one, we take 1/2. Our base, again, is the number of exchanges that take place, times the height, right? Which say this goes, let's say it goes down to 0 up to 3, so let's call that 3. So it would be 21 in half, which is going to be 10.5. And what we call that is total producer surplus. Now, this is different than surplus, like we were talking about when the price is too high or too low. But this is at equilibrium, the extra benefit going to consumers and the extra benefit going to producers. Right? I would have paid more. I got to pay less. I got an extra benefit. I would have sold it for less. I got to sell it for more. I got an extra producer surplus. Right? And the reason why we're looking at this right now is because at equilibrium, at this point of equilibrium is when those two things are at their max. Okay? How do you maximize producer and consumer surplus? Equilibrium. So the market tends to maximize producer and consumer surplus because it tends toward the point of equilibrium, right? So if I show this quick supply and demand, this point right here is going to maximize this area and this area, right? It's going to maximize the consumer surplus. It's going to maximize producer surplus. And when you add those two together, you have the maximum amount of total consumer plus total producer surplus. Okay? So equilibrium is going to maximize total consumer and total producer surplus.